Hello, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, my name is Christina, aka Northwest Reader, and this video is my October wrap-up, and it's gonna be a long one. I'm gonna try to just bust through the books. I'll describe what the books are just a little bit, but I just don't have enough time to go too into detail about it because this will end up being an hour long. So the month of October, I ended up ingesting 20 stories / books. I had a really good reading month. I discovered that I really enjoy horror novellas. I just couldn't get enough of them this past month. And this past month, I also discovered the horror group, the horror genre, the horror subgenre of booktube / bookstagram / book Twitter, and I'm in love. I'm in love with the people in the group. I'm really enjoying it, and I feel like I found where I belong. And in the month of October, I met my goal, my Goodreads goal, which was, I believe, 85 books, and right now I'm sitting at a 97. I upped my goal to 100. So this is going to be the first time I ever read 100 books in a year. So the very first book that I finished in the month of October was I Am Not Your Final Girl by Claire C. Holland. I gave it 4 stars. It's a collection of poetry all based around different horror films. And a lot of the reviews I read, people were saying they didn't know or recognize a lot of the movies mentioned in the book. So I feel like I've seen quite a few horror films, so I thought, oh, I'll probably know a few. I knew maybe 10% of them. Like, actually knew them well enough to where once I was reading the poem, made total sense. I loved it. It was great. But at the same time, if you hadn't seen that horror film, you could still appreciate the poem as itself, because the poems were just beautiful or deep. And my favorite one was Ginger Snaps, which is about werewolves. And reading the poem, you really wouldn't fully understand what it meant unless you've seen the movie. But the whole time I was just Googling these movies and screenshotting them so I can watch them at a later date and maybe go back to the book to reread the poems. But yes, pretty good book of poetry, 4 stars. So the next book I finished was Catherine House. I gave it 3.5, 4 stars. I thought it was okay. It was fairly weird, like what everyone has been saying about it. It's just about this school where it's really hard to get into, and it follows a girl and her experience there for, I think it's 3 years. I don't know how much I can share without spoiling it, but it's just super bizarre. A lot of people either really love it or really hate it, and it was okay. It was frankly kind of forgettable, in my opinion. You're kind of confused the whole time, but at the same time, I don't know. And plus I didn't care for the main character either. She was just frustrating. So yeah, but I think it was like a 3.5 I gave it, and yeah, again, it was forgettable in my opinion. So the next book I read was a novella, and it's Elisas Melody, a psychological Gothic horror novella by Jason Robert Ducharme. I gave it 4 stars. This was pretty much the start of my love for the horror novella, I guess. Yeah, this was my very first one, I guess. It was really good. It's about this, I believe he was like a butler. I would say butler, sure. And his boss at the house is sick and not well, so his bosses, and it's his best friend, his family is coming to visit him. The butler guy, he sees his best friend's granddaughter, and he believes that the granddaughter is a reincarnation of his little sister that had passed away, and that he feels like he was the reason she passed away. And crazy things happen. And the ending was a surprise for me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was creepy, and I really enjoyed it a lot. And it's a super quick read if you want to just get creeped out a little bit, but with a fast read, I highly recommend it. So the next book I read was Bad People by Craig Walwork. I gave it 5 stars. Oh, I did a little mini, well, it wasn't me. I did a vlog, a reading vlog for 3 horror films, which I'll link down below. And this was one of the ones from, this is the book from that vlog. And if you want to know more about my thoughts on it, just watch it because my mind was blown. I love the book so much more than I was expecting, because it's a detective novel, but it was genuinely creepy, and the twisty turns in it I did not expect in the least. And so by the time I finished it, I was just blown away completely. It's very True Detective-esque, like the show. Like there were some slow parts in the middle, yeah, but you kind of need that. And then once you get to the end, it just, ooh, so good. He has a second book for this in the series, so I believe it's gonna be a series maybe, but I'm gonna read that hopefully here pretty soon. Yeah, and that should say a lot because I'm just not a series person. Like I don't like reading book series. I just never do. But this I actually want to, which is shocking. So yes, Bad People, 5 stars. So to be a part of my woo-woo-ness that I like to do, I've been watching The Haunting of whatever. I don't even know what channel it's on, but it's on YouTube. They post on there. And I've been watching Kim Russo do her psychic readings with ghosts and hauntings, and I enjoy the show so much. It's a guilty pleasure. But I realized she had 2 books, so I read her 2 books. The first one I read was The Happy Medium, Life Lessons from the Other Side. And I gave that 4 stars. I thought it was pretty good. It gives her background of how she started to become a psychic, her abilities, the information she knows about the other side, and she talks about reincarnation. So I was like, yeah, I love this. And then her second book I read, Your Soul Purpose, Learn How to Access the Light Within. That I gave 3 stars. I've read a lot of self-help books, and this one was just of every self-help book you probably ever read or heard of, so I was just meh. I could have done without. But her first one was way more interesting. Also, I forgot to mention, the majority of these books were ebooks. I used the crap out of my e-library and Kindle Unlimited, so that's why I'm not holding them up. But the first audiobook that I finished this past month is You Must Not Miss by Katrina Leno. I gave it 4 stars. It's a weird one, for sure. It kind of is Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe vibe, but darker, of course. This poor girl, she gets sexually assaulted, and I think it's by her best friend's boyfriend. And then it's just after that, no one believes her, everyone bullies her, and she becomes just the laughing stock. And then during all this, her family falls apart, and she has a drunk for a mother. So reading her experience with her mother, I was just like, girl, I've been there. So the whole time she's talking about that, I'm like, oh, I can relate so much to this. But she ends up creating this other world, and just crazy things happen, and it's a revenge story for sure. And I thought it was decent. The audiobook was pretty good. If you just like really weird stuff, I would just, yeah, you'd probably like this. So the next book I finished was Lakewood by Megan Giddings. I gave it 4 stars. It's about a a girl who's black, and she gets an invitation to participate in this like memory study, and the pay is really good, and she's going through hard times trying to find a job and paying for all this stuff, and her mom's really sick, so she gives in and she goes to this study, and it's just so weird. The whole time, it's another one of those, I had no idea what was happening. I read a lot of these types of books. These types of books where it jumps around a lot. It's very disorienting because you're going from the perspective of the main character, which I believe her name was Lena. And it just says a lot about the government experimenting on the black community with chemicals and just psychological warfare and stuff like that. And it was really good. It was scary in the sense that it's all believable. I didn't research any of the stuff. They kind of mentioned different cases in the book, but it's startling, and it's heartbreaking. And yeah, the ending was pretty good. The ending was kind of not as predictable as I was expecting, but wow. So the next book I finished was Invisible Girl by Lisa Jewell. I had this as an e-arc from NetGalley, so yay! Thank you, NetGalley and publishers. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. I liked it more than her last book, which was The Family Upstairs, I believe. It's about these women in this town that are getting sexually assaulted, or they're end up being missing and stuff like that. And it follows a family that moves into this neighborhood temporarily while they get their house worked on for something. I forget why, but they suspect that their neighbor across the street, who has a history now, which you'll learn about in the book, they suspect that he's the one assaulting these young girls and harassing them. And it was so much stuff happens, and it's multiple perspectives, and it was just so good. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't predictable, and the ending was a surprise, and it was a good domestic thriller, and yeah, I recommend it. I've only read now 2 of her books, and this one is obviously my favorite so far. So to take a break from all of my horror thriller books, I ended up listening to a female romance on Script. It's called Trail Mail by Ada Stone. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was okay. I didn't really care for the main character. That was my main problem, I guess. But it's about a woman who goes on a hike, and I believe this takes place in Washington State, I want to say. She goes on this hike, and while she's hiking to these different points, she's doing it for, I think, a month or for a while. It's a long backpacking trip. And during certain points of the trip, she finds these notes from this man wrote to his ex-girlfriend, and he asked her to meet him at some point to discuss the relationship. And this main character is all up in that business. Like, it kind of drove me crazy, because I was like, why is she so invested on these strangers? It doesn't make any sense. But she was concerned about the woman's safety and all this stuff. But that's pretty much it. I don't want to spoil it, but it's a super short romance. I guess you can say it's a romance. And the ending was kind of a surprise for me, but I thought it was okay. I think I gave it 3.5, 4 stars. I want to say. It's just whenever she is finding these notes, and then she's projecting on the people in the situation of the notes. And the whole time I'm like, what is her problem? But then she has her own history of like domestic control and violence and stuff like that. So it made sense, but during it I'm just like, mind your business. Like, I don't know. So the next book I finished was also an audiobook, and it is the Trees Crept In. I gave it 5 stars. This was probably one of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to. At certain points, the main character, she's reading from a journal, or writing in a journal, but you hear what the narrator is reading what she's writing, but then there's also a creepy whisper of what her fears and what she's thinking overlapping what is being written, if that makes sense. And it made it so creepy and scary, especially when you're not expecting that whatsoever when you first listen to it. And because I was listening to it while cleaning, and it gave me chills because it felt like someone was right there just whispering in your ear, and it's just ugh. But it was really done well. The narrator did an amazing job. But it's about two young sisters. They run away from home to their aunt's manor, and weird things happen, essentially. I really love the ending. The whole book itself is super disjointed, like the other books I mentioned earlier, and it's really confusing, and you're just like, what the heck is going on? But it gets tied up perfectly at the end, and you can't help but love it. I know I did. I just loved it a lot. So right now I'm watching Bly Manor, and the atmosphere that you get from Bly Manor is kind of what you get from this book. But this book is pretty dark. But I highly recommend the audiobook. It was so good. So the next book, the author actually contacted me and asked if I would read it, and I'm always up to read someone's book. And it was on Kindle Unlimited, so I was like, heck yeah, why not? So the book I finished was Riley's Excellent and Not at All Fake Exorcism Service by Sophie Queen. I liked it a lot. I gave it 4 stars. For some reason, I didn't realize it would be funny. I don't know. I think it's because I've been reading just a bunch of spooky, scary books, thriller books. So once I started reading it, I was taking it as serious. But then at certain points, the dialogue and stuff, you're like, oh, this is funny. It's goofy. And it is funny. It's about a writer. Hello, editing Christina here. I was editing my video, and I wasn't sure how much of my camera recorded what I said because it had cut off right where it cut off. So I realized a lot of the beginning of what I was saying in the beginning of the book that I was saying didn't get recorded. So here I am. It's about a writer, and she is married, and her life is pretty mundane, and she just has her writer's juice, which is just booze that she drinks throughout the day, and she's trying to write. But then one day her husband contacts her and tells her, hey, my parents have suddenly moved to this gated community, and they're about 45 minutes away, I believe, and they want to have you over for dinner. So you should go do that. And she's a little apprehensive because she knows that her in-laws don't really care for her, or she doesn't really care for them and stuff. So she just begrudgingly goes. When she goes there, she sees this house that they obviously cannot afford is beautiful and huge, and she doesn't understand like where they get all this money and wealth and stuff. And then physically they look much younger and in better shape, and just they look amazing, and all they say is that they meditate and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty funny. But yeah, that was the part that got cut out, and it drives me crazy that it did that. But I'm gonna go ahead and add this in. Okay, it's pretty funny because it's all about the gated community and it being kind of like a cult, but it gets unveiled of what it is, and it's pretty good. banter between all the characters is hilarious. I highly recommend it if you want something silly and like a little spooky, but nothing too spooky. Like I put in my review, it reminded me so much of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from the 90s, like the show, where they have spooky elements, but it's campy, you know? So yeah, highly recommend it. So the next book I finished, I actually have a physical copy of it. It's a miracle, I know. The author, he was so kind to send me a copy, and this is actually my very first physical ARC. So thank you so much, Sergio Gomez. But it is The Visitor. Ha! So stinking good. See, I wasn't sure at first if I would like it because it's about aliens. I'm so about aliens. And then it's about Christmas, and Christmas isn't my favorite, but it's horror, and I like alien horror stuff, and I like Christmas horror stuff, so I thought maybe. And I read Camp Slaughter by him, and I love that, so I had to give it a shot. My God, it was so good. I gave it 5 stars. It's about 6 people snowed in at a diner, and while they're there, they get a visitor, and craziness happens. The first encounter with said being is so good, and it was super creepy. It was so creepy. It gave me the vibes of the movie The Thing, the original, and it was just it was gory loveliness, and I feel like this is original. I haven't read many alien horror books, but I feel like this is fairly original, and I highly recommend it. It comes out December 1st, so you should definitely get it. If not, pre-order it. I think online you can pre-order the Kindle version for like $3.99 or something, which I did. But it was so good. So the next book that I read, it's actually a playwright. The author, she was, I think it was Twitter, and she mentioned like if anyone wanted to read it and rate it, hit her up, so I did. It's called Unboxed by Brianna Morgan. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was pretty decent. It was the first time I ever read a playwright, but I love reading scripts. I'm a script person for movies and TV shows through and through. I can read them all day. So this was pretty decent. She sent me the audio book for it too, so it was a different experience. I never listened to anything like that before, but I liked it. It's about a YouTuber who is into paranormal ghost stuff, and he's all about getting his numbers up and his subscribers and views and stuff like that, and trying to make money from it. And then it becomes this trend where YouTubers are ordering these boxes that have horrific things in it. So he ends up doing that, and bad things happen. So it's pretty good. There's one scene, I don't want to say which scene, but it was very unsettling because how it's read to you, you can picture it so vividly, and then when the reveal happens, you're just like, ugh. It's one of those moments in like ghost movies and stuff where, But yes, 4 stars. And thank you so much again for sending me a free audio copy for a review. So this book, I actually listened to the audiobook also. It's called Doll Bones by Holly Black and Eliza Wheeler. It is, I believe it's middle grade. I thought it was decent. I gave it like 4 stars, I think. If I was younger, obviously, I feel like I would have enjoyed it way more, but it's about a group of friends, and they play D&D and stuff. And the one little girl, she has at her house this porcelain doll, and she said that the ghost of the porcelain doll told her that her bones are in there. The little girl's bones are in there, and they need to take them to where she should be buried or something like that. So it's an adventure. It's a coming of age, and it's all about their dynamics as friends and growing up and all that stuff, all the while a little bit of a ghost story. It was decent. I thought it'd be a little spookier, but it wasn't. It didn't seem scary at all, but I think it was decent. It was okay. It just, I didn't know what I was expecting. I just saw it get recommended to me on Libby, so I was like, okay, I'll try it. And it was alright. If I was in middle grade, again, I think it would be better. So the next book I read, it's a graphic novel, and it's called Infidel. It's a graphic novel, and I gave it 4 stars. It's about a haunted apartment complex, and the evil ghosts that live there thrive off of racism and hate and stuff like that. And it's about a Muslim woman who lives there, and all the hate that she's been getting, and just these ghosts are killing people. So these racist ghosts. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. The artwork was beautiful. Ugh, and it was really creepy. It had some really unsettling, scary drawings in it, but I thought it was decent, and it said a lot about racism against Muslims, and so yeah, 4 stars. So the next book I finished, I had the ebook for it for a while, and I just hadn't had a chance to read it, but I finally did. It's called Wonderland. I gave it 3.5, 4 stars. It was okay. It's one of those books where you don't know really what's going on. Super weird. It kind of reminded me of the Trees Crept In vibe, because it's about a tree. The tree, or the wooded area, is super paranormal, spooky, supernatural. It's about a family that moves from the city life, I believe, to the wilderness, and it's a husband and wife and their 2 kids, and just really weird stuff happens. They compare this to The Shining, and I think it's because the husband kind of loses his mind a little bit and is getting controlled, like the whole family is getting controlled by this entity that you just don't know about until later on. The ending I thought was okay. I wasn't a big fan of it, but again, it was just, they have moments also where I was just not super impressed, but it was okay. It was kind of a letdown for me a little bit. I put 4 stars, but I'm leaning more towards like 3, because again, it wasn't super memorable, but it was just a story that I feel like I've read multiple times. So the next book I read, it was actually recommended to me by my library. I did have a physical copy of it, but I had to return it. It's 12 Nights at Rotter House by J.W. Ocker. I gave it 5 stars. I saw other people's reviews of it, and people not liking it. Like, they were bored with it, and by the time the ending happened, it was just like, it was too late for them. I enjoyed it from the beginning to the end. Like, the middle was kind of slow. It had its moments, but I feel like it was a good setup for the ending. And I was so shocked by the ending. And yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. It's about a writer that pretty much locks himself into a haunted house for 12 days. Yeah, for 12 days. And after day 1, his best friend comes and joins him, and you just discover their past relationship and like their fights, and it's just the banter between them. You can tell they've been longtime friends, so they play games and doing silly stuff and just getting hammered in this haunted house. And it wasn't too scary, but it was definitely a thriller and kind of a mystery, and I thought it was decent. I was shocked by the ending. I wasn't expecting it whatsoever, and it was good. It was so good. So the next book I finished, it's an audiobook, and I got it from NetGalley. It's The Initial Insult by Mindy McGinnis. I gave it 3.5, 4 stars. I thought it was alright. It's my first book that I actually listened as an ARC from NetGalley, and it was an automated voice, I think is what you would call it. I didn't think it was bad. I mean, it didn't really have any emotion behind it, obviously. And I saw that was the biggest complaint, that the voice of the audiobook people didn't care for. It didn't bother me. But it's about two friends who, I mean, they used to be friends, and their relationship kind of fell apart when they were in middle school, I want to say. They were having a sleepover, and then something happened. So then the one girl wanted to go home, so the other girl's parents drove her home. And on the ride home, the girl's parents disappear, and you don't know what happened to the parents. Like, they just disappeared, and the only witness would have been the girl's best friend, but she claims she doesn't remember anything. Their relationship kind of fell apart, and it's about the girl who lost her parents trying to get the truth out of her ex-best friend. And it's very Edgar Allan Poe-esque, and I like that part of it. But again, like, the ending wasn't, it was kind of a surprise, but it wasn't completely fulfilling. And I know there's going to be a companion novel with it, I believe, a series, something. There's going to be a second book. So it makes sense how it ended, but I saw a lot of people were griping that they didn't like how it ended, didn't answer anything, blah, blah, blah. But I'm hoping in the next book that we get more answers. So the final book that I finished, I actually got an e-arc of it on NetGalley a little bit ago, and then the author was so nice to send me a physical copy, which is somewhere that I don't know where it's at right now. It is Hunger Pangs by Scott J. Moses. I gave it 5 stars. It's his book of short stories, and they were so good. They were so good. He is such a good writer. Like, he knows his skill. He's really good at it. I think one of my favorites were, I want to say the first one, because it had like a scary horror moment, and I really enjoyed it. And it was so atmospheric, and I was just in the moment when I was reading it. But there was just so many, there were short stories about grief, love, loss, death, addictions. Like, it was really good. It was so good. And before each short story, he gives a little blip of what he was going through when he wrote it, where he was at, what time in his life he was. Like, it was where the story came from, and it gave it so much more of an intimate moment into the stories that I appreciated it. And I thought it was like the best way to start a story. One of the stories was with his little intro to them. Also, with short stories, I usually prefer short story collections when they're all from different authors, because a lot of authors, when they do these short story collections and they write all of them themselves, they kind of have the same tone throughout, from the beginning to the end. It just feels like one disjointed novel of a story, if that makes any sense. But this, it wasn't like that at all. Like, each story had its own vibe, its own tone, and I appreciated that so much, because sometimes it's just, you get bored, you know. But this was not boring whatsoever. It was interesting from the first story to the last, and it was really good. I really enjoyed it. And again, thank you so much for the physical copy. It's beautiful. So those were all the books that I finished in the month of October. Oh, I'm tired of talking. But one book that I actually started, I got halfway through, and it's Karen Slaughter's Pretty Girls. This is where I'm at now. I'm almost done with it. So yeah, I plan on finishing it this month, of course, in November. But wow, a lot of people were saying that they thought this was super gory and just gross. I mean, it is gross, don't get me wrong, and it is shocking, and it has moments, but I didn't think it was as bad as everyone made it seem. Like, I don't know if I'm just now that I've read a lot of gory slasher books. Like this didn't really do that to me, like for me, so. But the story is really good. It's just about these young girls that are disappearing, and I don't want to spoil anything. I went into this completely unknowing of what it was about, and it was worth it. So that's what I say. Just go in not knowing anything, but it's just about missing girls and what happens to them and who's involved, and whoa, a lot going on here. But so far I would say it's about 4-star right now. It's decent. So I think that is it. I'm not gonna do a November TBR because I'm just gonna go with the flow. So I for sure want to finish reading Pretty Girls, and I also want to read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Everyone's been saying great things about this, which is awesome. I'm excited to start it. I think I saw one review where they were critiquing about the lack of diversity, pretty much, or the very white perspective of the main character. I didn't read too much into a review because I didn't want it to influence my first read through this, but I'm going to keep an eye out for what the little bit that I read that she mentioned. But yeah, I'm hoping to finish this month. So yeah, those are all of my books that I finished and ingested in the month of October. Did you read any of the books that I mentioned? How was your October? Did you have a good month at all? It's election day today and I'm nervous, so good times. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you made it this far, you're awesome. I'm not banking that I'm gonna do a ton of reading this coming month, because I notice when I do crazy amount of reading one month, then the next month I have like a reading hangover and I end up just binge watching shows, and a lot of the shows that I love are back, so we'll see how this goes. But again, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later.